stop caring, watch her panic. The Power of Indifference. Imagine a life where you are unshaken by the chaos around you, where your peace is unbreakable and your mind is free from the constant pull of external pressures. What if the key to such inner strength and freedom lies not in the world, but within yourself? Today I invite you to discover the incredible power of indifference. It's not about turning away from life, but about turning inward, mastering your emotions, and finding peace despite the turbulence around you. Stay with me as we explore the timeless wisdom that can transform your mindset and elevate your spirit. Number 1. The nature of control. Stoic philosophy is the distinction between what we can control and what we cannot. This simple yet transformative concept teaches us to focus only on those things within our grasp, our actions, thoughts, and reactions, while accepting that many aspects of life are beyond our influence. Life is full of unpredictability, and the Stoics believed that our emotional turmoil often arises from trying to control things outside of our power. There is a story of a young man named Marcus who was deeply troubled by the actions of those around him. His friends often made decisions that affected his life, and he would become upset whenever their choices didn't align with his expectations. One day, an elder in the village noticed Marcus's frustration and decided to teach him a lesson. He asked Marcus to carry a heavy stone on his shoulder for the entire day, and at the end of the day, Marcus was exhausted and sore. The elder then asked him, "Why did you carry that stone?" Marcus replied, "Because you told me to." The elder nodded and said, "You see, the stone was heavy, just like the things you try to control. But in the end, they are burdens that only you carry." This story mirrors the Stoic belief that the more we try to control what others do or what happens in the world, the heavier our emotional burdens become. By recognizing the limits of our control, we can shift our focus to what truly matters: how we respond to situations, how we treat others, and how we align our actions with our values. The Stoics believed that by mastering our responses, we regain the power to shape our inner world, no matter the chaos outside. Number 2. Indifference to external outcomes. One of the core teachings of Stoicism is the practice of indifference to external outcomes. This concept revolves around the idea that our happiness and inner peace should not be dependent on things outside of our control. Stoics argue that we often tie our emotional well-being to the success or failure of external circumstances, whether it's our career, relationships, or the opinions of others. However, Stoicism teaches that these things are fleeting and unpredictable, and therefore cannot provide lasting satisfaction or contentment. When we become attached to external outcomes, we open ourselves up to frustration, anxiety, and disappointment. If we base our happiness on achieving a specific goal or obtaining approval from others, we place our sense of self-worth in the hands of circumstances beyond our control. The Stoic approach encourages us to detach from these outcomes and instead focus on how we respond to them. By doing so, we maintain a steady sense of inner peace, regardless of what happens outside of us. This indifference doesn't imply that we become passive or uncaring about life's events. Rather, it means that we take action without becoming overly invested in the result. We can pursue our goals, work hard, and strive for success, but we do so with the understanding that we cannot fully control the outcome. Whether we succeed or fail, our value remains intact, and our peace is not disturbed. The Stoic mindset allows us to engage with the world fully, but with a sense of detachment. We learn to accept the natural course of events, realizing that while we can control our actions, we cannot control the universe's response. By practicing indifference to external outcomes, we find the freedom to live authentically, without the constant fear of failure or the need for external validation. Number 3. Emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is the ability to stay composed and maintain inner stability in the face of adversity or stress. Stoicism places a strong emphasis on cultivating this resilience by focusing on how we respond to life's challenges rather than the challenges themselves. According to Stoic thought, external events are neither inherently good nor bad. It is our judgments and reactions to these events that determine their impact on our emotional state. By training ourselves to respond with rationality and equanimity, we build emotional resilience that allows us to face difficult situations with strength and clarity. Stoic emotional resilience is the understanding that we cannot control the emotions or actions of others. When someone wrongs us or a situation doesn't go as planned, we are often tempted to react impulsively, driven by anger, frustration, or disappointment. Stoicism teaches that instead of succumbing to these emotional reactions, we should pause, reflect, and choose a measured response. By not allowing external events to dictate our emotional state, we fortify ourselves against emotional turmoil. This resilience doesn't mean suppressing or ignoring our emotions, but rather recognizing that our emotions are within our control. We can acknowledge our feelings, but we don't have to let them dominate our decisions or our behavior. Stoics focus on cultivating virtues like patience, wisdom, and self-discipline to help navigate through emotional challenges. When we practice this kind of emotional resilience, we are able to handle criticism, failure, and setbacks with grace, remaining calm and focused even in the most stressful situation. The ability to remain steady in the face of hardship is a central tenet of Stoic philosophy, teaching us that our emotional well-being is not reliant on external circumstances, but rather on how we manage our inner world. Number 4, the illusion of others' power. In Stoic philosophy, one of the most significant sources of emotional turmoil is the mistaken belief that others have power over our emotional state. We often give away our peace by allowing the actions, opinions, or judgments of others to control how we feel. This gives rise to feelings of anger, resentment, or insecurity as we become overly invested in what others think or do. Stoicism teaches us to recognize that this belief in the power of others is an illusion. The Stoics argue that no one can truly disturb our inner peace unless we allow them to. If we are constantly seeking validation or approval from others, we give them the power to shape our emotions. When someone criticizes us or when we face rejection or judgment, we may feel insulted or upset. However, the Stoics remind us that these emotional reactions are within our control. The true power lies not with the person who may have provoked us, but with how we choose to respond. By practicing indifference to the actions of others, we free ourselves from this false notion of external power. We realize that our happiness does not depend on whether others approve of us, nor does our sense of worth fluctuate based on someone else's opinion. The Stoic perspective encourages us to focus on our own actions and virtues, understanding that we can control how we respond, but not how others behave. When we relinquish the belief that others can control our emotions, we take back our power. We stop reacting to external events and instead begin to shape our own emotional landscape. By recognizing that others do not have the power to dictate our feelings, we find greater peace and freedom in our everyday lives. Number 5, focus on what you can control. One of the fundamental teachings of Stoicism is to direct our energy and attention toward the things we can control, while accepting with equanimity those things we cannot. This focus on personal agency is at the core of Stoic philosophy, emphasizing that our lives and peace of mind are shaped by our choices, not by the uncontrollable external world. The Stoics remind us that while we cannot control external events, the one thing we always have control over is how we respond to them. In everyday life, we often find ourselves preoccupied with factors beyond our control. Whether it's the weather, the behavior of others, or the outcome of a particular situation, we can easily become frustrated or upset when these things don't go as we wish. However, Stoicism teaches that this frustration arises from a misunderstanding of what we are truly capable of influencing. When we focus on things outside of our control, we surrender our peace to circumstances that have no bearing on our true character. The Stoic approach encourages us to redirect our attention inward, focusing on our thoughts, actions, and decisions. We may not have control over how others treat us, but we can control how we react to their behavior. We may not be able to prevent failure, but we can control how we learn from it and how we persist in the face of adversity. By narrowing our focus to what we can influence, our own mindset, virtues, and responses, we can reduce anxiety and build a sense of empowerment. This practice fosters resilience, as we stop expending energy on things that ultimately do not matter in the pursuit of a virtuous and peaceful life. By focusing on what is within our power, we are free to act with wisdom and integrity, without the emotional burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Number 6. Freedom from approval. Stress and dissatisfaction in life is the constant need for approval from others. This craving for validation can shape our decisions, behavior, and even our self-worth. The Stoics, however, argue that this need for external validation is a source of bondage, as it ties our emotional well-being to factors outside of our control. True freedom, according to Stoic philosophy, comes from releasing the desire for approval and learning to cultivate self-worth from within. When we depend on the approval of others, we place our happiness in their hands. If others praise us, we feel validated and secure. If they criticize us, we feel diminished. This roller coaster of emotions is exhausting, and ultimately it erodes our ability to live authentically. The Stoic mindset encourages us to find contentment within ourselves, rooted in our own values and principles, rather than external opinions. By letting go of the need for approval, we stop seeking validation for our actions, choices, and achievements. Instead of acting according to what others expect of us, we focus on acting in alignment with our own moral compass. This doesn't mean we become indifferent to the thoughts or feelings of others. It means that we no longer allow their judgments to define us. Our sense of self-worth becomes independent of external factors. The Stoics believed that true contentment comes from living in accordance with virtue, not from pleasing others or conforming to societal expectations. When we embrace this perspective, we no longer need to perform or seek approval to feel worthy. We act with integrity, guided by reason and our inner principles, rather than the fleeting praise or criticism of others. This freedom from approval allows us to live more authentically and with greater peace. Number 7. Stoic detachment. Stoic detachment is often misunderstood as emotional coldness or indifference, but in reality it is about cultivating the ability to remain unaffected by external events while still acting with virtue. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, does not mean withdrawing from life or becoming apathetic. Instead, it is the practice of not allowing external circumstances, whether they are successes, failures, praise, or criticism, to disturb our inner peace. It is about achieving a sense of emotional clarity and control over our responses to the world. Stoic detachment is the understanding that we cannot control external events, but we can control how we respond to them. For instance, when faced with a challenging situation or an emotional setback, Stoicism teaches us to step back and view the situation objectively, without being swept away by impulsive emotions. This detachment allows us to assess the situation with a calm and rational mind, making it easier to act thoughtfully and virtuously, rather than reacting in a moment of emotional turmoil. Detachment also involves separating our sense of self-worth from the external validation or judgment of others. By not attaching our identity to our achievements, appearances, or others' opinions, we protect ourselves from the fluctuations of external validation. We can pursue success or engage in relationships, but we do so with the understanding that our worth does not depend on these things. This detachment creates a sense of emotional freedom, as we no longer live in fear of failure or rejection. The Stoic goal of detachment is not to become disconnected from life, but to live with a deep sense of inner peace, guided by reason and virtue, unaffected by the changing tides of the external world. By practicing this detachment, we maintain our tranquility in the face of life's inevitable ups and downs. Number 8. Emotional manipulation. In life, we often encounter situations where others attempt to influence or control us through our emotions. This can happen in both subtle and overt ways, through guilt, flattery, anger, or even passive-aggressive behavior. The Stoic philosophy teaches us to recognize and protect ourselves from emotional manipulation by remaining detached from the actions and emotions of others. Understanding emotional manipulation is key to maintaining our inner peace and emotional resilience. When others try to manipulate our emotions, they often seek to provoke a reaction, whether it's making us feel guilty, angry, or afraid. For example, someone might try to make us feel responsible for their unhappiness or use anger as a tool to force us into compliance. The Stoics understood that emotional responses are within our control, and that reacting impulsively to such provocations only gives others power over us. Instead, they taught the importance of observing these emotional triggers without immediately reacting to them. By practicing emotional self-awareness and detachment, we become better equipped to identify when we are being manipulated. We can recognize the attempt to provoke a reaction without giving in to it, allowing us to remain in control of our emotions. The Stoic response is not to suppress or ignore our feelings, but to acknowledge them without letting them dictate our actions. For instance, if someone tries to use guilt to manipulate us, we can recognize the feeling of guilt but choose not to act on it, instead focusing on what is right or virtuous. Emotional manipulation thrives on our reactive nature. When we stop allowing others to provoke us, we deny them the power to influence our emotional state. The Stoics believe that true strength lies in being able to respond to others with calmness, dignity, and wisdom, rather than being swayed by external emotional pressures. Through this practice, we preserve our emotional autonomy and maintain a balanced, rational approach to all situations. Number 9. Self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, emphasizing the idea that true fulfillment and happiness come from within, rather than relying on external sources. The Stoics argue that when we place our sense of well-being in the hands of others or in external circumstances, we become vulnerable to disappointment and emotional instability. Instead, they advocate for cultivating an inner strength that allows us to remain centered and content, regardless of the external conditions we face. Self-sufficiency means understanding that our happiness, peace of mind, and sense of worth are not dependent on what happens outside of us. We cannot control the actions or opinions of others, the outcome of events, or the external world's ever-changing nature. However, we do have complete control over our own thoughts, responses, and attitudes. By focusing on what is within our control and cultivating an inner life grounded in wisdom, virtue, and rationality, we create a foundation of self-sufficiency that remains unshaken by the uncertainties of life. Self-sufficiency encourages us to develop a strong sense of self-reliance. It means making decisions based on our own principles and values, rather than seeking approval or validation from others. It also involves learning to be comfortable with solitude and introspection, allowing us to rely on our own judgment and reasoning rather than external influences. The more we practice this self-reliance, the less we are affected by external disruptions, such as criticism, praise, or failure. The Stoic ideal of self-sufficiency does not imply that we should isolate ourselves or reject the support of others. Rather, it means understanding that true strength lies in our ability to navigate life's challenges independently, relying on our own virtues and wisdom to guide us. Through this self-sufficiency, we cultivate resilience and a deep sense of inner peace. Number 10. Creating personal boundaries. Personal boundaries are essential to maintaining emotional well-being, and Stoic philosophy provides a framework for setting and preserving them. Boundaries are the limits we establish to protect our mental, emotional, and physical space from external influences. In the context of Stoicism, these boundaries are not about shutting ourselves off from others, but about defining what we are willing to accept and what we are not. By setting clear boundaries, we protect our inner peace and prevent ourselves from being swept up in the emotional turbulence of others. The Stoics understood that much of our emotional suffering comes from allowing external forces, whether it's the actions of others, societal expectations, or unpredictable circumstances, to dictate our emotional state. By creating personal boundaries, we assert control over what we allow to affect us. This could mean limiting exposure to negativity, choosing to distance ourselves from toxic relationships, or deciding how much time and energy we devote to certain people or situations. It's about protecting our emotional energy so that we can maintain focus on what truly matters, our inner growth and virtue. Stoic boundaries also involve recognizing what is within our control and what is not. We cannot control the actions or opinions of others, but we can control our responses to them. When someone's behavior crosses a boundary we have set, whether through disrespect, manipulation, or unreasonable demands, we can choose to disengage or set a clear limit without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. The Stoic practice of detachment helps us remain composed and thoughtful in these situations, rather than reacting impulsively or allowing others to manipulate our emotions. Creating personal boundaries allows us to maintain our emotional autonomy and make decisions based on our own values. It prevents us from becoming overly dependent on others or their judgments, allowing us to live more authentically and in alignment with our true selves. Embracing the power of indifference is not about withdrawing from the world, but about cultivating the wisdom and strength to rise above external circumstances. By understanding the nature of control, practicing emotional resilience, and setting personal boundaries, we take back our peace and empower ourselves to live more authentically. Stoicism teaches us that true freedom lies in the ability to remain centered, regardless of the chaos that surrounds us. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Stoic wisdom. I wish you the best of luck in applying these principles to your life, and may you find lasting peace and strength.